you'll know for sure tonight. I'm rising from my shallow grave, and I'm holding my switchblade tight, 'cause you can blast me with dynamite, but I won't rest in pieces. I'm a revenant, baby, and I'll be back. It's gonna be one pale morning, all middle of the night, when I come round to take your life. I know it will feel alright, 'cause you can bury me underground, paved over for good measure. I'm a revenant, baby, and I'll be back. He's a revenant. 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 Be sure to watch your six. I'm out with the boys tonight, and if we see your cheating face, well, you're in for a fight, my darling, 'cause you can try to drown me, babe, but I won't sleep with the fishes. I'm a revenant lady, and I'll be back. He's a revenant. 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 Watch out now! He's a revenant. I'm a revenant. He's a revenant. Let's go now! Alright! Hands off! I'll be back! I'll be back! I'm a revenant. I hear her alright while resting my eyes, like a sigh in the night, like a maggot in the pie. She's calling my name while I give it a try, like a thin veil of rain, like a sip of fine rye. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. She's calling my name under dusty black sky, like a beast to be tamed, like a stamp on my thigh. I hear her all night with my eyes wide open, like a whisper in the dark that makes my belly burn. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. Softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. City lights so far away, on a trip or a long holiday. Take a drive downtown without a care, 'cause you're high, I wanna be there. I wanna be there. City stars, pretty at night, sparkle softly, gems in the sky. I know you see them, I know you know that I love you wherever you go, wherever you go. City winds, blustery and cold, touches everything, makes it feel old. But you want me, always discreetly. You complete me, and I never wanna let you go.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for another fantastic Daz Plus Pro Artist Series stream, part of the In the Studio with Daz 3D series. Wonderful to see you all. Mr. Brian and Mr. Nate and Miss Julia are here. That is wonderful. These are my mods. Mr. Jeff is here. Mr. Websoul X201 and Trevor are here. Wonderful to see you. I'm so glad, Mr. Adventure, that you've worked out this issue that you had two objects that were combined and you wanted to split them up. That is one of those common things. We can totally talk about this. I'm so happy to see you. Swords for Two. The Biscuits is here. Nico 1967, wonderful to see you. Amaranth is here on time, which is just wonderful. I, on the other hand, was a little bit delayed. I hope that is okay. Night Tech is here. And have I missed anyone? Victoria is here. Wonderful. That is Ted Murphy, and I believe that is everyone I can currently see. If anyone I haven't shouted out is there in the chat, I do apologize, but you're welcome all the same. Knuffles Biscuits, that's really nice. Knuffeling is a German word that means giving a tight hug, in case you didn't know. My dear friends, thank you so much for joining me on the previous occasion in which we've explored the rigging capabilities of Daz Studio, and I had this loose concept that we did talk about weight maps, but we didn't quite talk about them in much detail, so I thought we're going to go and take a look at those today, among many other things, like, you know, that suggestion that we just had in the chat. Perhaps we should have a look at how to do that, separate two objects so that we have, you know, two that can be treated as two individual objects. So maybe I'm going to show that. So there's going to be a little bit of Blender modeling, and so that we have an object that we can fiddle with the weight maps a little bit and show the implications of that. Weight maps are actually used not just in rigging, they're also important for dForce simulation. So I'll show you some of those implications as well, and how they can be really helpful to exclude certain parts of your object from dForce simulation without having to fiddle with you know, surface tabs and parameter tabs and all that. So it's kind of nice to be able to paint things in that you want to simulate more or less, and, you know, exclude things that you don't want to simulate at all. But then also the other cool news that has happened is that Daz have released the Daz Horse 3, which is super awesome, and I thought we're going to take a look at that as well, only because that's a product that's just come out, and I may have purchased the mega bundle there because there's some really interesting, exciting products in there, and I thought we can have a look at that. How to apply poses from, like, you know, where there's only one icon in the product, that you can apply a pose to both the rider and the horse at the same time. How to adjust, you know, what the horse is doing, where it's looking and all that. It's a very cool figure. It's a custom figure actually, made by Alessandro, so very cool. The man who brought you the anthropomorphic hippo and many other funky cool things. So yeah, the Daz Horse 3. It's not a Genesis figure. It's something that is a custom figure, custom rigged. So as such, it doesn't follow the regular Genesis skeleton. So there's a mega bundle here that has all these funky things, including the horse, but also things like the kind of a horse, like a rocky old cart here, and the kind of, you know, these things that the horse is wearing here, the kind of the harness, is that what it's called, I believe. We don't have any outfits, not for the people, but for the horses, and we do have poses for Genesis 9, so this would be such a thing that you have the pose for the horse and the pose for the rider. A nice pasture. I haven't actually looked at that yet. That is probably very nice. Look at that, Victoria patting the horse. I like it. It looks like a plastic horse. This is some horse feed. Here's some props that we also get. So very exciting stuff. I'm glad that we have a first animal with the Genesis 9 figures to play with. Very cool. But as I said many times before, I'm also really open to questions and suggestions. If you have something that's kind of burning on your mind and you think, hey Jay, I always wondered how to do that, do you know anything about it? Then if the answer is yes, then I'm more than happy to take a look at that. So I'm thinking, let's just start with the horse. While we're talking about the horse, let's have a you know, the first half hour is going to be the horse segment. Let's do that, and then we're going to have a look at weight maps. How is that? And if you have anything else, just drop it in the chat. If I have kind of missed it, then my moderators will fish it out, and we have that special little Discord channel that I'm going to keep my eye on. One of those things. All right, that's true. Websoul is one of my supporters, actually, and Websoul has recently discovered his passion for Substance Painter, and as such, he's now working on some texture sets for the horse. That's a really nice idea, like the cyberpunk horse and all that. Here's the star of the show, Daz Horse 3, comes in under figures. And if I double click him, we can see that under figures, we have the horse with a gray shader, we have the thoroughbred female, and we have the thoroughbred male. And that comes by default with dForce hair, by the way. Let's take a look at it. I'm just going to bring up my highlighter thing. That means you can follow my cursor a little bit better. Let's go and bring in the female. Double click. And in filament, it's not going to look as good as in, well, this is kind of a different shading mode here. In filament, it looks a little bit different than in texture shaded mode. So in filament, you can just about make out the mane that is standing up, but you don't really see it clearly. So that doesn't show up all that well in filament. So I recommend you switch over to texture shaded to see all the guide hairs. And those stand up because it's not dForce simulated at the moment. So we have to go and click simulate for that to happen once we found a cool pose for our horse. So let's go maybe start with that actually. I mean, even though it's just a standing pose, just with the horse product you get several poses here, you know, horse drinking from the, hello, there we go, drinking or eating grass, something like that, or looking over his shoulder, something like that, hello, there we go, looking the other way, good stuff, or looking the other way, idling around. I wonder if we can actually build kind of a gallop Annie block with that. That might be a good topic for an upcoming stream. I'm looking forward to that, something I'd like to try out. And here's she's jumping. Let's go with a jumping pose here and just see how you should use dForce to simulate this. So it's all set up. Once it's in the pose, you can just go and leave it from here. So I would say start from memorize bone, switch that off so that the horse doesn't go into it's equivalent to the A position. We're just going to go and simulate all the guide hairs from here. So that's with this button switched off, start bones from memorize pose, switch that off. And also under the duration, I would say rather than use current frame, I'd say use animated custom and then pick something along the lines of 90 frames. So 30 frames isn't going to be enough to let all these hairs settle. So you can either use the animation playhead for that if you wanted to do that, or you can just go and type in a single value here if you don't want to use the timeline. Both these options work, but if you were to use the timeline, then the timeline value here needs to be set to something like 90 or 91. And that means if I hit simulate now, Daz Studio is going to go ahead and do its thing, and then we can have a little, chat while it's doing that as it goes and lays down the guide hairs. Look at that. So this here, we're coming up to frame 30, and that is not quite enough to simulate the whole mane. So 90 frames, maybe even more if you want to have a look at that. Yeah, we could probably do more. 90 is probably the minimum that I would recommend for simulating that. You can also take these things off if you don't want to have hair on the horse. That's also cool. Like in the scene tab here, if you open up the horse, then you can see that all these things are attachments. So the ears, those aren't actually the ears as in the ears themselves as an attachment. It's just the little hairs on the ears. That is what that is. So they have, it's a bit like the vellus hair that we had on Victoria 8.1. That is that. And then we have the eyelashes as well. So those are separate attachments. And then we have the mane. So if you don't want to use the mane, you can just take that off. So mane 1 and mane 2, we have two parts of the mane here. And then we have also got the muzzle. There it is, muzzle hair, if you don't want to use that. And then we have the tail. That's a separate figure here as well. So yeah, but of course, with hair, that just looks quite exciting. That, whoops. What did I do? Did I do it? Yes, I accidentally parented the mane to something I shouldn't have done. Dang, I'm going to go and re-simulate all of it. Dang, so sorry. Clear everything. And I'm going to go and turn my animation into a total maybe of 120 frames. And then let's go and simulate that again. And then we'll have a look at how to deal with poses, also materials of our horse, because there's quite a few that we can use. So the brown version isn't the only material that you can use. Thanks, WebSol. Just noticed that at the last minute. You didn't see how ghastly the mane looked parented to the face. That was terrible. 30 frames is for the plugged-in e-horse, Jeff. Absolutely. Hey, I'm glad you got a lot out of the rigging stream. I appreciate your feedback. That's really, really nice to hear. Rigging is such a deep topic, and Alessandro would have probably dealt with that as well in rigging this horse from scratch. So yeah, that has a completely custom skeleton. And I'm glad you took notes, and I'm so glad that you can now rig your own objects. That's really cool. All right, let's say that is well animated. Have a look at what that looks like now in iRay. And then we'll take a look at the materials and also how to adjust my man, or my girl here rather. Isn't she pretty? Unbelievable. It's a horse. I love it. Yeah, it's got the big horse eye and the nozzle, and it's very cool, isn't it? That is just beautiful. I can't wait to see what you guys can come up with a horse as the main character. Let me go and select the thoroughbred female here, and then head over to materials. And were they not? They were not in the regular horse. They were in a different package, weren't they? Have I not installed that? Have they only come out today and I didn't buy them? Dang, blasphemy. Good point. I don't have materials for the horse. Weren't there materials for the horse? Okay, forget materials. Let's have a look at poses and accessories for the horse. Could have sworn I saw a white one. And a darker breed. Did I mix that up with the horse 2 from a couple of years ago? That's possible. I guess I mixed that. We can put the Colorworks shaders on here. That's a nice idea. See what happens when we do that. Will that work? That'll require us to use a surface selection. Does it? Yeah, there we go. That works. Not great, but it does work. They're not in the mega bundle. Interesting. I see. Also, this is something I didn't know. I had assumed they were, but hey, thank you for letting me know, WebSaw. I didn't know that either. So let's not use Sloshworks shaders on the horse. Instead, Jay, go buy the materials. Which ones are they then? Do you have a link for that? I might have a look just on the store page. See if I can find them there in the front. Rustic bundle. Squishy Humans by Lyra has also been released, by the way, if you were a fan of the Squishy Humans for Genesis 8 product. Stallion poses. Well, this is what's hot, isn't it? That's not what's necessarily new. Tapidary, that is a material, isn't it? Base materials, there we go. Ah, that's them. I don't have them yet. Dang, I'm totally going to go and buy them because, hey, this is what you can turn your horse into. I thought I had them. One of those things. Could well be that. That is exactly what I'm looking at, Brian. Exactly. Okay, so separate product. Okay. Good to know. So I had great difficulty with making something like this, making the rider actually sit on the pole. So this is something that I just didn't know how to do, because even though we have the horse poses, and I also have poses for Genesis in there. Let's see, Western Horse Attack, that's not it. West Ride hierarchical poses, let's use those. If I go and apply one of those to the horse, then of course, the horse rides, which is awesome. But I didn't see any separate poses here for the rider. So let me go and bring in the Genesis 9 figure and see if how we can deal with that. The trick is to parent the Genesis figure onto the rider before we apply the pose. So some of them are hierarchical poses, and as such they pose both the horse as well as the parented Genesis figure, but it must be parented to the hip of the horse, otherwise it's not going to work. That is something that threw me, because this is not something that I knew anything about. I don't know if these are actually the ones. This one here, let's use this one here, the horse walking all. If I go and apply this to the horse, then the horse poses. But if I try to apply this to Genesis, then I just get an error message here. And the trick then is to take Genesis and put it onto the hip of the horse. So not just parent it to the horse, but onto the, come on, open. There we go. Onto the hip of the horse. So hip, then Genesis. And then with any of the attached figures selected, it doesn't have to be the top one, can also be, the hip can be anything here. Then you go and apply the pose, and then that pose is being applied to the horse and to Genesis. When I tested it the last time, no, it doesn't work. Maybe it's a different pose. Man, this isn't a good start, is it? Maybe it's different poses here. Oh, I see. These poses are actually relying on the Genesis to be in the wagon. Sorry about that. Wrong pose. Too many horse poses. How about this? Yes, hierarchical pose. Perfect. This one here. So click that. There we go. And now Genesis sits on the horse. And, there's some adjustment that's necessary. But in principle, we're there. I think this also it takes into consideration that a naked person wouldn't sit on a naked horse. You'd probably go and sit on a saddle. And the saddle sits a little bit above the horse. Let's see if we can add those accessories to the horse. But yeah, so this is how that works. So when I had the Genesis figure not parented and then tried to apply this to Genesis, it just, nothing was happening. So Genesis needs to be parented to the hip of the horse for that to work. Let's see if I can find some accessories here for my horse. Like rustic cart is one such opportunity. There we go, cart, harness, and all that. So that's cool. But that's not quite a saddle. So if we don't want to have that, we can take the ropes away and the halter and use something like the Western tack here. Western tack, that's a saddle with some harnesses and all that. Look at that. Very cool. And now the pose looks kind of more believable with something underneath the figure. So fascinating. It's just, I've never made pictures with horses. So very exciting. I'm excited to play around with this and see what we can collectively come up with that. Poor horse, I know. Daz Horse, there was actually a release just before Christmas, I remember, and that was the reindeer. And the reindeer was kind of built on top of the most of the features of the Daz Horse. So it's a little bit like that with the Genesis figure, that you have custom characters for a base figure. I think that's what we're going to see with the Daz Horse, that we'll maybe see custom figures that require the Daz Horse, but are basically something derivative of that is horse-like, but it could be like, a cow or something like that. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Can you group them and apply the pose to the group? Shall we try? That is something that I've never tried X201. But imagine, I would imagine it might work. Let me just go and create something like a primitive here. Let's make it a cube, because everyone likes the cube. Perhaps also that cube's a little bit large, so maybe make that a bit, whoops, dude, the cube, make that a bit smaller, not too small, mind. Put that over here, and then we'll say the cube and the thoroughbred horse. Let's go and create a group from that. Parent both items. We have a group. So what happens if we now apply the hierarchical pose to the group? Does it work? It does. It ignores the cube, but everything else seems to work. Does it? No, I think the figure is just following the pose, but the figure itself isn't posing. So that answers that question. Good, glad you asked. I like it. So yeah, that does not work. You gotta make sure the horse is the top item there. Or if you do apply something to the horse with the rider on it that's inside a group, I would imagine that would work. Does it? Does it? No, that also doesn't work. So they can't be in a group. Good point. Very cool. If we take them out of the group again, then does that work? It looks like the arms of the Genesis figure are not following either way. Whoops. How interesting. Indeed. So maybe I'll go load these things in again and we'll try this again, just because that's a really interesting observation. I had no idea. So much stuff. Maybe we'll with the male. Let's try the male horse out. This is why I like us coming together. Let's poke the machine in directions that no one had even thought of. I'll go bring my Genesis in again. And then we'll have a look at how to adjust the horse, like the facial expressions of the horse and the features of the horse. And then we're going to get on with weight maps. Okay, so I'm going to go and bring Genesis onto the hip of my horse again. And then we'll try gentle horse poses perhaps. Let's try that. That certainly poses the arms of the figure, as well as the horse. Woohoo! Can imagine some exciting shots with that. Good perspectives and all. So yeah, so that works. And just because I'm kind of curious about that, what happens if you were to turn this into a group with or without something else parented to it? What happens if I apply the pose to the group? Does that, yeah, that works. So maybe it was the product. That could be. So with the gentle horse and poses for Daz Horse 3, this seems to work with or without a group. Ah, interesting. So this certainly works. But some poses, just to bring the posing discussion to a close here, let me go and undo this so that the horse comes out of the group again. Sometimes there are things that attach, I suppose, to the horse. Oh, your horse, if you want to reset the horse into its equivalent of the A pose, you can do the same that you do with Genesis. So you can go to Edit, Figure, and then you go to Restore Figure Pose. So that'll do that to the horse, and it'll also do that to Genesis if you were to select that. Edit, Figure, Restore Figure Pose. Don't go to 0. 0 is something similar, but it will set every single value on the figure to 0, whereas Restore will set all values back to the default value, which might not always be 0. So that's why Restore Figure Pose is preferred. So if you had something like a custom character dialed in, like Michael, Michael would be 100% default as the grayed out bit, which is the default. But if you set it to 0, Michael becomes the base figure. Let's have a look at one of those things that comes with the card. Was it the rustic card here? No, it wasn't the rustic card. It was the road buggy. No, that wasn't it either. Hang on. Western Death wasn't it either. Yeah, what's the road buggy? Road buggy it is. Okay, so road buggy accessories. Road buggy and harness. That'll be applied to my horse. Ding. Okay, good stuff. And we don't have the buggy just yet, so let's go and pop that on. And this comes with some poses as well for the Genesis figure to actually sit in the buggy. And I think in that case, there's a little message here that says parent the G9 figure to the card for the poses to work. So let's go and do that. Genesis 9 not to the hip of the horse anymore. We're going to go and left click and drag it to the road buggy. There. And then we'll see if these poses work. I suppose it doesn't. Does it not matter? No, it doesn't matter what item in the hierarchy is selected. It should work. No! Dang, it doesn't work. Okay, let's try that. Hierarchical pose and Genesis figure doesn't move. Nor does the card actually move, I've just realized. Curious, why does that not work? Could be that it needs to be parented to the hip. The one thing I can tell you is that when I tried this out yesterday, it was working. Shame I don't remember what I did there. That is a shame. Let's load it all again, just out of curiosity, because I'd like to get this. I'd like to understand how this works. Let's try the female again. I did try it with the female. Does that make a difference? Can't do. So female horse loaded. Go to something like accessories. Can try the rustic cart. But I stick with the buggy. Let's see if we can get the buggy going. There's a road buggy, and there's a load all for the buggy. There we go. That does that. How's that set up then? So harness and buggy are both parented just to the horse, just like Trevor says. Let's bring in Genesis figure and parent them to the buggy, and then apply a hierarchical pose, and that should work, right? So Genesis 9, parent them to the buggy. Right, so far so good. I'm going to just go and select the top figure here, just so that we're all on the same page here. And then parent G9 figure to cart, which makes sense. Let's go and do this, and horse walking, and figure doesn't pose. I can't tell you why. So this has worked yesterday, I can tell you that. I don't know why it doesn't work anymore. Maybe it's a different product that I was testing. That's also possible. Let me try it with the rustic cart, because that was the same principle. I remember thinking, hey, that's good to know. I'm going to mention that, and now it doesn't work anymore. Dialog box or the script? I don't think there was a script, to be honest. That is throwing me off a little bit. Tell you what, let me go and explore why that is, and if I figure it out, I'll make a video about it, because we're really here for weight maps and all kinds of other exciting things. So yeah, that is interesting. I don't know why that doesn't work anymore. Let me compare it to the horse, just out of curiosity. Does that do any difference? No, that doesn't do it either. What happens if I apply this directly to the buggy? No, also doesn't work. It also seems that, yeah, this is what the rider was holding onto, these these harnesses here. So don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm clueless. Buggy be gone. Genesis can stay. No, Genesis is also gone. Good stuff. Let me go and bring the pose back into its original position here. Restore figure pose. This is why 3D is so exciting, isn't it? Drag the horse onto the buggy. I'm not sure, really. I'm going to explore this another time, because this would take us several hours to work out. I'm just gonna move on with things. It did work, and I promise you I didn't parent the horse to the buggy. Not that I remember. So something interesting about the horse is where to find things to animate it. And just to quickly look at the skeleton, which is very different from Genesis. So we have the top item here, we have the hip, but then things get completely different. So this is a custom figure. So we have the left femur and the right femur, and then we have the tail, which has several segments so that you can pose it here. And we have the waist. From the waist we then have the abdomen, and then we have the chest, and then we go up the skeleton like so. So that means if you wanted to move these pieces here, though this is the neck technically, and the neck has, it's a bit like the spine in the Genesis figure. So you've got the neck 1, neck 2, 3, and then you've got the head. So if you wanted to have the horse kind of, you know, drink something, you'd use a combination of neck 1, 2, and 3. Or you can build yourself a controller and bend the horse down and help it along with neck 2. And then there's another one with neck 3 here. So reach all those high up, difficult to reach places. That's how we do that. I'm not sure if we have a controller for the tail, but you could create yourself one, because there's like, how many segments are there? 8, 9, look at that. 10 segments. So the tail works a little bit like that. I don't know if they've implemented something that, you know, lets you curl the tail up, but you could literally make that happen bit by bit and then turn these things into a controller. There's a video on the Daz channel that's been released recently in which I'm showing you how to do that. So then you can, you know, do all kinds of curly and tail wafting effects with that. Oop. So the things that are traditionally located in the head of a figure, like eyes closed and eyes left, right, and stuff like that, they are in the top part of the figure. So if you select the top thing, go onto the parameters tab, and then head over to the pose controls, then you see things like, let me just go close this down so we can see this a little better here. You see the body and the head and the tail, and it looks like that they have actually implemented some controllers for the tail, so that's cool. So for the head, then you go and you have a head bend. That does that. You have the head side to side, because, you know, horse needs to look over their shoulder. That's quite nice. And those are most likely moving multiple bones in the body. Some features as well, some muzzle length. We can change that. That's nice. Ears back in front, because, you know, we need to listen into different directions. Ears side bend as well. So you could turn this easily into a donkey, I guess. Eyes closed, this is one of my favorites. It's kind of a facial expression. I think they're actually grouped as well. If you open head, you have base, ears, eyes, mouth, and tongue. If you want to whittle those down a little bit. So eyes, we have eyes closed. He blinks at me. How exciting is that? And then you can have him look up and down in combination, you know, with moving the head. So quite cool. Don't forget to give your horse an expression. Mouth is also openable. Hello guys, how's it going? Isn't that funny? And I think he can chew as well, like when he's chewing some hay. That's nice. Very cool. And with the mouth open, I believe we also have a bit of tongue control here as well. So mouth open, then we have the tongue out. Tongue comes out in case he wants to lick your face or something. With the tongue out, you can then go make the tongue go left and right, and also up and down. So quite articulate, that little horse. Very cool. So yes, there's a ton of adjustment in the horse as well. I didn't see the tail earlier. Let's see what happens with the tail. I think that's probably going to be the controller that I was describing. Yeah, there we go. Exactly the kind of controller effect that I thought should be in here. So yeah, they've put that in. Very good. Tail length as well. If your horse needs a longer tail, you can make that happen. And the thickness slider, we have that as well. Good stuff. Groovy. So that's the horse, and I really don't know why those poses weren't working, but I will certainly look into it, because it did work when I tried it out. So there we go. No vampire fangs. No, I think that's an add-on pack we could actually make, Brian, you know. bring the horse out into Blender, select the teeth, make them large. Hello, Wilbur, exactly. Super funny. So Daz Horse, if you have any questions or suggestions about the Daz Horse, do let me know. I'm gonna go and get on with today's main topic, which is in fact the weight maps and how to adjust them and what the point would be of adjusting them. And we talked last time about the fact that the weight maps are in charge of moving the face groups that are necessary to actually shift the geometry around in conjunction with the bone. So the bones are the skeleton in a rigged figure. The bones are then attached to a group of polygons, and when you move the bones, that particular portion of the geometry is moved. And this happens with the help of the so-called weight maps. And they're essentially influence groups that tell the bone how much or how little of the geometry that it is assigned to a bone is supposed to be moved. So it doesn't have to be 100%. It could be much less than that. And we showed that with this wobbly cylinder that I was building. So if you have 100%, in fact, maybe we'll just build that from scratch quickly and then get back into the swing of things. If we do that, then we can see what happens when we smooth them, but we can also see what happens when we take stuff off a weight group and when we add stuff to a weight map. Let's do that. And once we're happy about that, let's have a look at creating a dForce weight map, because that's kind of the same principle behind it. And then we can see how easy it is to influence how much dForce should be simulating a portion of your garments, I think. The waiting is now beginning. Yes, indeed. So last time, I don't know if I did this last time. I think I did, didn't I? I'm going to go and grade, just make a really simple cylinder, maybe just with 12 divisions here. I'm going to go and turn this around. I'll do this in Blender because it means I have slightly cleaner topology there in a moment. I'm going to go and scale this up, and then we're going to bring it into Daz Studio and then play with it there. So we do that. Control A to apply the scale. We can also apply the rotation. And maybe I'm going to go and bring that up so that the origin point can be kind of in the bottom middle here. It's not all that important, but let me go and do that. So object set origin to the 3D cursor, so that it's not in the middle anymore, it's at the bottom of the object. So now I'll go into edit mode, where I can see that I really don't have much geometry in the middle, so that's thing's not going to bend. So I'm going to go on Control R and put a few segments in here, maybe just like 5 divisions. Let's do that. Hit enter, and that should be good for our demo. There's one other thing I want to do, only because Daz Studio doesn't handle this very well. This on the side here, this is what's known as an n-gon, and n-gons in any 3D engine are not good, including in Daz Studio. So they prefer things to be triangulated, or at least quads. Quads are good. Quads are being triangulated under the hood, but ideally you want to give everything triangles for rendering, because, and this is just going off a little bit, but just so that you've heard of it, the quads can. So triangles are always planar. That means there's always a surface off which light can be bounced off. But on a quad and on an n-gon, that is not necessarily the case. So if I were to go and select this one vertex here and just go and move that up, then that means these 3 vertices, they are on the same plane, but one of them is now bent out. And as a result, this is not really a flat face. It's technically kind of bent, but there's no geometry in the middle. So that means that when the render engine comes to bounce light off it, it doesn't really know what to do, because it's ambiguous. And that is why under the hood, things are just being turned into triangles, which are then always planar. And n-gons have the same problem, but of course the problem is even worse, because I could take this vertex and put that here, and I could take this vertex and then, you know, put that here. So that is now like a completely wonky face that needs to just be somehow triangulated. And if we give this to Daz Studio, it'll just go and make one point here and then just go and cut this literally everywhere. And that looks very inelegant. So the reason why we should give the render engine tries, or at least quads, is because it means we have predictable results. If we leave it up to the render engine to do the triangulation for us, or to Daz Studio, we get unpredictable results that we're not quite happy with, like, you know, a point in the corner here. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to go and merge all these guys in the center, and then I'll just have something like that. And that's probably okay for our demo here. And I'll do the same on the other side here. Merge at center, perfect. So it's not a very long cylinder, but for our demo, is it going to be okay? I'd like for it to be a little bit longer, actually. Yeah, Jay, I'd like for it to be a little bit longer. Okay, let's go and extrude this into the X and then merge in the center. Perfect, and we do that here as well. There, okay. It's not super symmetric, but we're okay with that. We're okay with that. Like last time, I'm also going to set up my face groups here. So I'll look at this from the front, take all of these things, in fact, in transparent mode, so that I grab all these vertices and create these mysterious face groups that we talked about last time. So this one here is going to be called right, I'm thinking, and I'll assign that. And then here on the other side, I'm going to go and make that one left and assign that. And let's just hope that if I select this, that is working. And when I go and select that, that is working as well. It's my right and left rather than the object's right and left. Just thought I'd mention that. And now we can go and save that out and do some rigging in Daz Studio. Rigging stream scene files, that's cool. I can probably use that as well. And I'll just go and call this one cylinder V1. All right, here it's important that we export the vertex groups, otherwise we won't see them in Daz Studio. New scene. Import our friend the cylinder, and let's talk about weight maps. This was in here. Yes, perfect. So far so good. So this is something that we've discussed last time. Something we may not have discussed last time is that my cylinder now looks different than it did in Blender a moment ago. So this is smooth shaded, but in Blender it was not smooth shaded, and Daz Studio actually applies smooth shading to all these objects. I don't know if we talked about this, but it's an easy fix on the surface. It's a feature under geometry and smoothing. There's an option here that's called smooth, and if we switch that off, then we have the faceted look that we did have in Blender. I suppose it's switched on by default because every object in Daz Studio that we deal with is usually an organic object, but when it comes to something like tables and stuff that you bring in, you might want to switch that off. This is always suitable if you want to apply a smoothing modifier to the object afterwards, but because we're not going to do that, for us, no smoothing does actually deliver a slightly better result. Okay, so far so good. So do you remember how to turn this into a rigged figure so that we get to play with the weight maps? If not, don't worry about it. It happens under Edit, Object, no, actually Rigging, sorry, Figure, Rigging, Convert Figure to Prop. And then, sorry, what am I saying? Is it that? No, that's what am I talking about? It's Edit, Figure, Rigging, Convert Where was it? Was it object? So sorry, object. Object, rigging, convert prop to figure. That's what I was looking for. Duh, blonde moment there. Good stuff. We can use the general weights, and that'll give me my first bone. Dang, Jay, get it together. And so in order to see our bones, we head over to our little bone tool here, and we covered more of this in the previous session there. So this is technically the hip bone. We don't really use that for anything. I'm going to have two bones, one that's going to the left and one that's going to the right of it, and those will then get our face groups as weight maps, and that means we can wiggle the cylinder around. That's kind of the plan. So let's make that happen. On this bone here, I'll go and right click and say create a child bone. XYZ is fine in this case, and we're going to call this one right, I'm thinking. I'll adjust the length in a moment. I'll just go and select this center bone again and go and create myself another child bone, and I'm going to call that one left because that goes the other way. Also, it appears it goes the same way, but that's cool. We can go and adjust that by just taking this little red guy and moving it all the way to the other side. I'm going to use the front view for this. It's a little bit less ambiguous. Let's move that out and down. And the green guy does that as well. It goes down to here. And we'll do that. It's not super precise, but that's fine. We'll do that with this guy as well. He goes down here, and then we move the red guy out, make ourselves that, make ourselves that cylinder. So far so good, right? We remember all this. There. So then the next part of the journey is to tell each bone what face group they're supposed to be connected to. So if I head over to that geometry editor here, and go to my tool settings, then I can see that my face groups here have come in from Blender. So I have left and right, and each of these has 48 faces, and that's perfect. But my bones don't really know which part of them they're supposed to work with. So back on the bones tool, also in the tool settings tab, I have this selection group menu up here, and this now allows me to, I'm on the right bone here, I can tell the right bone, hey, you need to take care of the right face group here, and then you left bone, you need to take care of the left face group here. And you'd think that was it, but that was not it, in fact, because if I try to move my bones around, they don't seem to want to work with me. I mean, the bones move, but the actual cylinder doesn't, and that is because there are no weight maps attached to this. So currently the weight maps, well, there are no weight maps, but if there were, are there weight maps? I don't know, are there? Let's have a look. I think there are, but they're both 0. Yeah, there we go. So if I go to switch over to my weight maps tool, also available under tool node weight map brush, there is a weight map here, but everything is gray. So both my left and my right bone, they don't influence anything right now. So there's an automation that lets us, if you had a complex object and you had like 100 face groups or 50 face groups, you don't want to paint them in individually. You can have Daz Studio do this automatically by going with the right click here with your weight map tool selected, right click weight editing, and then there is fill by bone selection groups, and then Daz Studio is clever enough to give 100% to the whole geometry that is in that face group and give that to the bone. And so now we'll be able to move this thing up and down, and we can do the same with the right one here. Perfect. So far so good. So now about the adjustment process. Maybe we talked about smoothing last time, that this connection from no influence to 100% influence might be a little bit harsh. So there's a way to smooth this, but there's also a way to associate different groups with what we're moving, or also exclude certain groups from what we're moving. So if I didn't want the top part of the figure here to be adjusted with my bone at all, I could just go and paint this out. So the painting works by using these tools here. So these are tools. This is the paint brush, this is a smoothing brush, and these are gradients that we'll have a look at. So the paintbrush, if I go and left click and drag, so you have to go and you've got to be on the actual map that you're painting. You can go and left click and drag over a portion, and that'll then fill in an influence group. Like if I wanted to have something else here, then red means it's 100% influenced here. Or if I go and Alt left click, then I take stuff away. Sometimes you have to be a little patient to do that. There's also a sensitivity here. That's kind of the how much you're painting in. But notice that even though I can add something to it, I can't seem to remove something like here, this stuff that I've created there. I can remove that again, but I can't seem to remove any of this stuff, because I think it has to do with the fact, I'm not entirely sure why, I'm not an expert at this, but I think it has to do with the fact that we've automatically assigned this. So in order to get rid of this, I think I have to get rid of my weight map and recreate it, and then I can paint in as much or as little as I want. We'll do that in a second. So just to clarify, with this paintbrush here and your sensitivity value cranked up to a certain position, you can left click and drag to add something, and you can Alt left click in order to get rid of it. So that's how you paint. I think you can also go and adjust what modifier keys you use for that. And if you want to fill in the whole map, there's also a flood fill option available that I'll show you in a second. That would go with the right click. There's this weight editing fill selected, and then you can fill it with a certain value. In my case, nothing's going to happen now because I haven't got a selection. The selections, they happen either with the right click menu if you know what you want to select, or with the geometry editor menu. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, because I wanted to address what Mr. Adventure brought up in the beginning. So if I go and right click here and then I say geometry selection, select by, I can use face groups, so left and right, or I can use the surfaces, which is like the whole thing, or I can go with edge count or something. I'm going to go and use this here, maybe select the whole left area. That's my selection. If I wanted to say, hey, I want to have this also filled in, I can say fill selected by 100% or by something, 50%. And then I can go and clear my selection. So now if I move my right bone, it looks like everything is being influenced somehow, and some things work better than others, but you can see that this is now influencing more than I actually wanted, or more than I had in the beginning. So this is what the weight map does. It tells the bone, hey, all this is yours to move, and it's trying its best to do that. So if I go and undo that, or if I'm just going to do it again. So geometry selection, select by face group. I'm going to select all the left bit here. I'm going to go and fill this with 0. Then this is now gray. This means there's no influence there at all. And we're back to where we were. I'm not sure why this doesn't go away here, to be brutally honest. But this only gets us to the first point here. Yeah, this is something screwed up here. If I wanted to only move the tip of this thing and not all these segments here, then I'd have to be able to remove the weight maps that are now red here. And it looks like this doesn't work. But what can work is that we just remove this whole general weights map with a right click here, remove selected, and then we have no more weight maps. So now we can go and create ourselves another one, a new one, general weights, which is currently filled with nothing. And this we can now paint to our heart's content. So maybe with my paintbrush selected here, I'm going to go and just paint in this part at the top here. This happens on a per vertex basis, by the way. So if I try to paint something on the inside of a face, it's not going to work. But if I go and do it on the vertex, you can see that that is where it's actually painted. So it's not a texture. This is another important thing to understand. It happens. It's basically like, it's a bit like vertex paint. So it's stored with the actual vertex. So this is now influence weight compared to the previous one. There's also a way to adjust that here. I'll show you that in a sec. But now if we go and move that, only the top bit here moves. Not very well, I must say. But you know, that's essentially that's how you could get rid of stuff that you don't want to move. So if you had something, we were discussing this example last time, that if you had something like a piece of armor that behaves like cloth, and you think, yeah, I don't really want for that to happen. I'd like for this to not move or move more rigidly. Then you can use that weight map and just paint it in. And if you do find that you can't alt left click and drag to get rid of influence here, then you can go and remove the whole map and just set up another one. It's like in my case here, it's very difficult for me to paint because I think we have very low geometry here. If everything else fails, I can always go and just select it and then see if I can get rid of that. Yeah, this is not working great. Usually on higher density objects you would have that. Exactly, stretchy buttons, that's a great example. If you have something that for some bizarre reason behaves with the rigging of the figure and is not set up as a rigid follow node, yeah, sometimes it doesn't work very well. But in those cases, you can just go and select everything, usually. Select by face groups, this is right, and then I'm going to say fill with 0, and see, not even that has done it. So sometimes it looks like there's a bit of an issue there. So yeah, if you do ever have that, you just go and delete the weight map and just start from scratch. That is sometimes easier than trying to fix something that is unfixable. Like with Genesis 8, we had issues when we tried to have shoes from Genesis 2 or something that would be, especially high heels, well, high heels or non-high heels, often shoes would distort. And that's a combination of the weight maps being at work in the wrong places, but it's also the projection of old geometry versus new geometry that sometimes distorts things. So thankfully with Genesis 9, this is a much less an issue than it used to be. But yeah, that's how we can do that. Was there something else I wanted to show you? Weight display, I think. This is something that that you can play around with. So don't draw weights means that you don't actually draw any weights on there if you brush over it with the brush. But if you go and choose weighted vertices versus weighted surface, I think if we use surface, there we go. So we can actually surface versus vertices. Does that make a difference? If I go in the middle of it, does anything happen? No, because I wouldn't have thought so. From my understanding, these weight maps are stored on a per pixel basis. So is there a difference when we switch this over? It's just the display, isn't it? Weighted surface versus draw surface with weight. Oh, I see. Does it now go away? It looks like maybe I had the wrong setting on there. I don't actually know what that is for, to be honest. That's just the way they are shown, I think. It's a bit of a... I don't exactly know it myself. I'm not sure, Victoria. That is a good question. I think this here is just what is displayed. I think under the hood, weight painting happens on a per vertex basis no matter what we set here. So it looks like my painting hasn't changed, but if I go and change it to draw weighted vertices, it looks like I can't really draw anything anymore. So I'm not entirely sure what this means. It says weight display, so I would imagine it's just something visual. Let me go and remove this again and add another one. So I know I have nothing selected in here. That there's no values in there. If I go and left click and drag over this, it looks like nothing is displayed. But if I go now and switch this over from weight display to draw weighted surface, I see that my values that I had left clicked and painted are actually in fact in there. So while I was doing that, I didn't see it being displayed, but the drawing and the values have still happened. So I would imagine it is just a way to to visualize it, I'm thinking. Right. And also, Victoria, the other thing is that there's a known bug in sometimes this whole vertex painting thing isn't responsive. So you're not making it up if you work on this and you think, hey, I think this should behave slightly differently, and it doesn't. It's not actually you. It's kind of a bug in Daz Studio, I think. I believe. So the best way to get your things filled is literally by using predefined selections. And I'll show you this on the dForced dress, which I'm going to load in now, and then we'll see a little bit better of how you can paint in a weight map. And this is less for rigging and more for dForce, but the principles are the same in that the map determines where the influence is. So it's kind of cool to deal with these things here that we see on the geometry editor, these selection sets. They're kind of empty. Sometimes we have face groups, sometimes we have surfaces that are good, but if we're dealing with these sort of things where we think, hey, I've just made a very intricate selection and I need to keep selecting and deselecting that, then you can create yourself these your own selection sets. And let me show you how this works on a more complex object than this cylinder, and then we'll talk more about these weight painting tools here. I'm going to, should I delete him? Yeah, delete him. Right, okay. Right, yes, they might be difficult to reach. So this is where selection sets might actually come in handy. Let me use a dress that definitely doesn't have dForce. And I've picked one that is called, I think, the Take Me Back dress. Take Me Back for Genesis 2, and that was a generation that certainly didn't have dForce. But that isn't to say we can't use it, and we'll see how weight maps can come in handy for that. I'm going to load my favorite material here, which is the red polka dot material. Perfect. And I might also bring in a Genesis 2 figure actually, because that would be nice to have a model in place. And then we'll go and turn this thing into a dForced dress, a Genesis 2 base female. How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you in action every once in a while. The dress is not parented to the figure, but that's totally fine. The first thing I'm going to do is thank you, Brian, for the link. Excellent. The first thing I'm going to do is I'll have a look at the surface properties here, and not only do we see that we have several, so we've got the belt and the buttons, and we have the collar and the skirt and the top. So some of these things, they spring out as danger zones immediately, like the belt and the buttons. Like what Trevor was saying earlier, we probably don't want to dForce the buttons because they just turn into ugly drops, and they're not set up as rigid follow nodes here, I don't think. But even with rigid follow nodes, they could just hang on one vertex, and that vertex droops down, and as a result the button isn't in the position that we want it. So these are the buttons here at the back, and this is the belt. So the other thing that we see on any of these surfaces is that these are the old 3D light properties. So the first thing we want to do is turn all these into iRay surfaces so that we can that we can work with them a little bit better. That happens under shaders, iRay, and then we have the first one is iRay Uber. So with all these surfaces selected here, I'll go and double click iRay Uber base, and that'll leave the textures in place, but it'll turn all, it converts basically the shader from 3D light thing into an iRay shader. So now we can see that my list here for any of these will end at geometry, and we don't have simulation on here. So if we wanted to add that and we wanted to turn our dress into a dForced dress, let's go over with the dress selected to the simulation settings tab, right click on that and head over to dForce dynamic surface. And when we do that, we can see that our simulation properties are added, in fact, to every of these surface properties. And this is pretty much everything that we need for the dress to have dForce. But the problem is, of course, that maybe I'll go and save this here, just in case, you know, just in case something untoward happens, which I'm sure will happen. If the moment I click the simulate button, I'm going to use current frame is okay, initialization not from memorized bones and just for 30 frames. We'll see what happens. So we'll see that the dress will simulate and will change, but it might also explode, and it also might do this in unpredictable way. So especially the belt, I have a feeling the belt is probably, or could potentially be intersecting with the buttons. It could also be intersecting with the top or with the skirt, and so there's all kinds of danger things that could happen there, and you know, explosion might well be imminent. So Mr. Adventure, I think Daz have a Discord server, the official public Discord server. There is a Daz Studio channel in there. You can ask questions in there. I think maybe Brian can probably dig out the link. That is the only public Daz Discord that I know. That's the one. Perfect. Thank you, Brian. Yes, that's always nice to meet like-minded people there. Let's see what happens. So this works by using the simulation properties on a per material basis now. We could go ahead and tweak certain zones, like you could tell the belt, I don't want you to participate. We could tell the buttons, I don't want you to participate, but that might not remove issues that we have with garments. So this is where that dForce weight map comes in, and that works pretty much like the weight maps on the bone rotations. We can tell it this has more influence than that, or we can say this here can buckle but this one cannot. Oh yeah, look at that, this is classic. These are the buttons at the back, and it's, you know, it's already looking terrible. Let's go and make sure that doesn't happen, and I'll show you how we can use the weight map to exclude these things relatively easy. So glad I've saved my scene there. Yeah, so this happened because of, it looks quite pretty actually, but this happened because of the, I wonder if that's actually the button. What geometry is this here? Let's see, it's the buttons. Oh my god, yeah, it is actually the buttons. That's exciting. So you could go into here, and under simulation, under structure, you could say the dynamic strength could be, you know, you could disable that, or on simulation you could say visible in simulation, you could turn that off, and then they don't participate. In fact, we can try that and see if we can do it. I'm going to do the same with the belt simulation, not visible in simulation. Let's see, I'll go and clear that. I just try this again, just out of curiosity, see what happens now. Looks like it's working a little bit faster, but I have a feeling there's still issues, and one of those that it would be lovely to see as well is that I have a feeling the top and the bottom of the dress, they might not be connected with the belt. So it could well be that, and we can see it here, the skirt is a separate object, and the top is a separate object, and the belt are a separate object. So those are currently just floating around, and this is not how we had imagined our dForce simulation to go. But we can, once again, we can use the weight map to make selections that choose, boom, that choose which parts of the skirt we want to This is also very pretty. That looks, you know, that looks, wow. Boom. Whoops, indeed. Let's go do this. So even with those things disabled and not participating in the simulation, let's see how we can use that weight map and then whip it into shape so we can get a usable result out of this. And I'm hoping, Victoria, this is going to help with your underarm issues as well, hopefully. Don't know, let's hope. So with the dress selected, let me create the node that'll hold the weight map first. So it sounds like a crazy concept, but let's go over here to create dForce modifier weight node. So this is not the map, this is just an empty node in the scene so that Daz Studio can go and put something in it, namely the weight map in a minute, or multiple weight maps if we want. So when we go and click that, it offers to parent itself to the selected item, which is addressed like this. Here it is. And that's not the weight map just yet. Let's go into our weight map tool, or like from here, node weight brush tool, then go on to tool settings. Also very important tab to have open. If you don't have that, head over to the window panes and then bring open the tool settings, or right click in here, add pane, and then pick tool settings from there. Tool settings, very important. Any of these tools has different settings here. And this looks just like the one that we've looked at a minute ago. It has the same selection tools and all that, but it currently doesn't have a map. So this is where we can create one. And we have different types of maps that we can create there. So influence weights, this is the one that we want. That's the one that tells dForce if I paint my map gray, don't dForce this at all. If it's red, dForce it at 100%. And anything in between, dForce it, well, you know, a little bit, depending on the value. But you can be very fine-grained and add other maps to it. So you can have different parts of your garment that are more stiff or buckly, or, you know, have more density. So like the weight, the belt could have a higher density than a chiffon dress, but you could wear them together and they could even be the same object, but you can just dedicate, hey, this has a different property than that. So we're not going to go into that. I'm just going to go with the influence weights, hit add map, and then we have a map. And we can see that the whole dress is being simulated at the moment. So much like it's basically the same with that we saw on the bones. Let me go and switch this over to wire shaded. And let me go and switch everything into base resolution. I think the dress doesn't have high resolution enabled, but my Genesis figure does. So let's do that. There we go. Easy. So this is my map, and it currently says everything on my dress is 100%. So we could now go ahead and exclude the buttons and the belt from it. I mean, even though we've set this on the surfaces tab here, that's with the dress now once again selected, belt, simulation. I'm going to switch these things on again so that all our surfaces have essentially the same value here. But since these are materials, I can go and select them, and I can use my material selection tool to tell the weight map I don't want this. So let's try the belt. If I go and right click anywhere, I can go and say geometry selection. So we need to select the geometry in order to fill the weights on them. Once again, select by, in this case it's not face groups, it's going to be surfaces, and I'm going to say belt. Now that lights up the belt. Now I can go and add my buttons to the same selection. That is possible. So I can go right click again, geometry selection, select by surfaces, buttons. Now we have all these things combined, and now I can say once again right click, weight editing, fill selected with 0, and now these things are grayed out. So let's go and clear my selection. Perfect. So now if I go and simulate this again, I should have excluded the belt and the buttons, so they shouldn't be exploding anymore. So that's, you know, that's a plus. We'll probably still have this issue that the skirt's going to fall down, but hopefully we're not going to encounter any explosion issues anymore. So we'll tackle that one next. Aha, right, exactly. That is totally cool. And it's a bit of an aha effect for me as well when I discovered this. And it's just when you know, it's so easy, isn't it? But when you don't, you think, dang, how am I gonna deal with this? So yeah, even though we don't have explosions, the skirt's still falling down. So oops, we do have explosions. Cancel. But now these two things are no longer participating in our little soiree here. So on the skirt, I'm going to go and take the belt and maybe the buttons and just turn them invisible so that we can see what's going on behind them. Clear simulation, check. And I'll do that with 3D Universe scene tools. The one way to deal with this is you use your can't decide which viewport I'd like to be. Maybe this one here. I can use my surface selection tool, hover over the surface I'd like to invisibilize, like say this, and technically I could go over to surfaces, check out the belt, and under geometry I can just turn down the cutout opacity. So that'll work. But Scene Tools 2 has a nice feature in which a selected surface can just be invisibilized with the icon up here. So like that. Does the same thing, and it means it can also bring it back. But this really helps to hide things in the viewport without having to select the geometry and make the geometry invisible. It kind of does this for me with a click here. I'm going to do the same thing with the buttons back here. Yeah, so that is Scene Tools set 2, Brian. If you can find a link to that, select it first with the surface selection tool, and once it is selected, make it invisible, and then that's gone. But the object itself is still there, so that's good to know. We've already removed it from our weight map, but our issue with the skirt is that it's not connected to the top. And this is not something we can make in Daz Studio, but we can tell the dForce weight map, hey, don't simulate the whole skirt, like this first row here of polygons that's hidden with the belt anyway. Don't simulate that. Just like a bit like how to create a waving flag where you just have a plane and the right row of polygons. You just make sure they don't influence, they don't get influenced with the dForce simulation, and as a result it looks like the flag can go down, but this strip on the side where the flagpole is, that doesn't get moved. And we're going to use the same trick here with the skirt. The tricky bit is now making the selection, and also then how to bring the selections back. So I'll show you the trick of how to do that. So this is something we might want to do with the geometry editor. That's this icon here. And once again, with tool settings enabled, I can go and try to select this top row here. So I can go and select one polygon and then right click and try geometry selection and try to go use a loop. That sometimes works. Like on the top here, this is probably going to work, but on the skirt we may have a problem because the top row has a kink in the back and the front's kind of bending in, so we'll see how to deal with that. Ideally we select one polygon, right click and say selection loop, but sometimes we don't have so much luck. Maybe we'll select a few. Am I even selecting this here? Am I actually selecting my dress here? Yes. I'm on the right thing, and it looks like the tool isn't selecting what I want to select. Ha! Well, that's a shame, isn't it? I'm currently using a tool that should let me draw something on here, maybe not. Geometry. Selection type, polygon, selection mode, drag selection. But it looks like I can't select anything. Dang! Hey, that's not good. It's not on the weight map, it's actually on the dress. Hey, that is uncool, isn't it? Oh, is it because can I select it on other part? No, this is a. Let me go and just quickly save my scene and open it again, because I think this is, no, I think this is definitely polygon selection. Let's try something else though, Trevor. That's a good point. We see if vertex selection works. No, vertex selection or edge selection also doesn't work. Curious. Let me just go and save my scene, restart Daz Studio, and we'll do it. We'll do it again, shall we? Demo v2. Curious that. Very curious that. Give it a moment. It happens, you know. It happens. These things are difficult apps. Reboot, yeah. Sometimes that's the only thing that helps, and that's just nothing we can do about it. It's somehow refreshing to see this happen to everyone, actually. I also have multiple editions. I'm currently working with the publishing build here, which always has, for us PAs, it has the latest and greatest little feature improvements that the team are letting us beta test, so to say. Let me just go create a primitive here. Playing with 100 divisions. Good stuff. And just see if it works in principle. And if it does, we go load out the project again. Geometry editor. And we can indeed draw things in. So yeah, perfect. It works again. Okay, good. Whew. Dang, brother. Oh, are you? How exciting! First rule in customer support. What issues are you coming up against? User issues, you say? This is something that sounds like it. Is it you, Nico? Okay, I'm going to do the same thing again with the surface selection tool here. Maybe that was my mistake. Use this and then go invisibilize that. And the buttons, I mean, they don't. I'm not sure if they interfere with our selection making process. Just in case, if they do, make those invisible as well. See if we can go back to our geometry editor tool and select multiple bits and pieces. Good stuff. Phew. Okay, so as we were, I'm going to go and select one or multiple little pieces here. Right click, geometry selection, and I'll try to loop select that. And that didn't work so well. So it looks like it is trying to select the whole top row here. That's what I want. But this is selecting stuff that I don't really need. So if this had worked, I could just fill this with an influence of 0, and then this top edge would be held in place. But because I can see that other parts of the dress are now selected, if it's just a few vertices or a few polygons, you can just paint them out, but this goes all the way around and into a kink and all the way to the bottom, so I can't use that. So this doesn't mean it's the end of the story, though. We can try to use a different type of selection and then convert that. So in my case, I've used the polygon selection here, but we also have edge selection and vertex selection, much like in Blender. So let's try to do the same thing with edge selection, and then we can go and convert this into polygon selection. So let's do that. Now my selection seemingly goes away, because now I'm not selecting the faces anymore. I can select the edges here at the top. If I go and just select one and try to loop that, then it turns out Jay hasn't actually selected one. There we go. Let's try that again. Selection, loop. And that seems to have worked really well. So now I can see that the top of my skirt has been selected. So that's cool. So different objects harbor different challenges. So now then, marquee selection would be tricky as well. I mean, I could literally paint the whole top row, but if it's a complex shape, that's just, that's a lot of time I don't want to invest. So now with this, I can go and convert this into a polygon selection. And we do that by right-clicking, once again, geometry selection, convert selection to polygon or vertex selection. I have a feeling it's not going to work because we haven't selected quite enough edges. But in principle, if I click this first one, it should go and it's done the same thing. Dang, brother, that's totally not what I want. So, that is also possible, but it's not what I want. So I'm going to go and clear the selection, go back to edge selection and grow my selection. And that is also on the right click here, selection. Grow selection, or control and the plus on the numpad will do that. So either way will work. I might go and grab a little more. So this is the 2 top rows here, but it includes the part down here that ideally I want to have as a polygon selection. So with this now selected, this has just extended the selection all the way around. I can go and convert that again. Convert to polygon selection, and it looks like this is now selected precisely what I wanted without any what my grandmother would have called hackelimmels in there. So that's exactly what I want. But granted, this was a bit of an ordeal to get here, and if I'd have to go and reselect this time and time again, I'd like to save this as something that I can bring back because it was so complicated, because we're going to have to do something similar on the bottom edge of the skirt if we wanted to have that keep a little bit of shape. So in order to do that, I can save this not as a face group. I mean, I could, but I don't have to. I'm going to go and save this as a selection set. We've got these 4 types of selections that we can use. Face groups, which we now know what they are. They're used for bone rotations and all kinds of other things. We have surfaces, they're for materials, so I don't want to disturb either. There's regions, that is something that we don't really use, but I think Daz Studio uses it under the hood, so we're going to leave that well enough alone as well. But we have a 4th type, which is the selection set, and that's currently completely empty. And this is something that we can use to store complex selections like that. Right click, create selection from selected, and I'm going to call this one skirt top, or skirt top is probably good. And if I do that, I now have this group here that I can bring back should I need it, and that's really important on complex selections. It'll be saved with an OBJ, it'll be saved with your Daz scene, and this is kind of what we want. Going back to why we're actually doing this, once this is now selected, I can go back and choose my dForce weight node again, go back to my weight node tool, where I can now say this top row I want to go and fill with 0. And when I do that, it kind of smooths this out for me. Like we said earlier, it has to do with on a per vertex saving basis. So this vertex is now 0. This vertex is also 0, which is why half the face is 0, half the face is red. So this is because of the location of where that actually is. It's actually the vertex. And now I can go and clear my selection, and now I should be able to simulate my skirt with it staying in place. That was neat, wasn't it? Did that make sense so far? I'm going to go and switch to filament and save my scene as well, and go and simulate this, and we'll see what that looks like. Yay, indeed, yes. A duct tape tool, Brian, that would be very good. I'm glad it's helpful, Victoria. I'm glad it's helpful. Sometimes you find these tools and you think, hey, this could come in handy. Everyone should know about this. So that's nice. So the skirt no longer falls down, it stays in position. And even if we didn't have a belt, it wouldn't look all that bad, because at that top there, at the top of her hip, that is still kind of a conforming clothing. So, you know, that's working out okay. That's working out okay. So skirt doesn't move, but it still doesn't behave great in places. Like we've got this thing sticking out here, and that, you know, that's now simulated, but it didn't simulate very well. And this is where you can use the painting tools of the dForce weight map and just, you know, change either the value that's applied overall. We can also apply a gradient so that we say, hey, the bottom of the skirt needs to be that needs to have full whack dForce on it, but the top doesn't actually need it all that much. So we can, I'll show you how to do that in a moment as well with the weight tool. But for now, if this is an area of issue where you think, yeah, I wish the lovely little creases that the skirt had at the top, they've all gone kind of away now, or they've all been smoothed out a little bit too much, or dForced out a little bit too much. I'd like to retain those a little bit. Then you can go and go back to your weight node with your weight node tool, and then just go and hold Alt and click into here and just remove some of these parts. And you can be very granular about this. You can say, well, this here I'm happy to have full dForce, but this here I'd like for it to have less. So blue means it gets a little less influence. In fact, the whole top here, all these crinkles, I really want them to be retained. So this is hold down Alt and then left click and drag over your area. Sensitivity is how much power you paint this in. So if you set this to 1 and then hold Alt, left click, then it turns gray immediately, which means it removes any kind of influence there. But if you paint it in with like 50% or 30% or 40%, then you can go and brush over it multiple times. So 40% already rubs things out quite dramatically. So I like 30, and just lightly go over the parts that you think they should not be simulated, or not simulated quite as much. And depending on how complex your object is, this could take quite some time. But you can use the same effect on these other maps that you can use, like, you know, the stiffness and the buckling maps. If you have an area of your dress that you think, yeah, I'd like for this to buckle a lot or not so much, then you can use the same principle. It's just a different weight map down here. So it'll be like the shear or the bend or the buckling, something like that. So the mass density that you can use to say this is heavy, this is a light part of your dress, and you can paint in the weight maps just the same. So this is great, and this can, and so I'm bringing this up because most of us are not clothing creators. We just use assets that we buy on the Daz store, and sometimes they just don't behave the way we want them to. But if you know these tricks, you can just go in and say, oh, I'll just make this adjustment here, that adjustment there, and then we'll see how that goes. Another option that I would have had is to not fill it with 100%, just fill it with something, you know, slightly less. Let's see what that looks like if I go and simulate this. So this should buckle less in these places, but overall I think it's going to still buckle a bit too much for my taste. So it's a bit like a petticoat style, so it's supposed to be a little bit you know, it's supposed to sit like this. It's not supposed to fall down like a chiffon dress onto the figure. So for that, we may have to go and do some, you know, do some more adjustments. But look, this stuff that we've painted out here, that's already had, it's a step in the right direction. I'm retaining all these good crinkles here, and the bottom of the dress, you know, I could have painted out a little bit more to retain more of them. But, you know, this gives the whole dress a very different feel. And I didn't touch any of these scary parameters like, you know, share this and buckle that. So very nice, very nice. Gradient, yes, gradient. Lyra actually just showed me that a couple of days ago, because I was thinking, I can't work this tool out, what's going on? And she was very kind, she explained it to me. So I'm gonna totally explain the gradient now. So this dress is a good good explanation for that. We'll come back to it. Let me go and show it to you on a plane, just for the sake of showing that gradient tool. Let me go and create a plane. A 2 meter plane is good, and it's lying down here, and we'll imagine it's a piece of dForce cloth, just so that we understand the tool. So as such, I'm going to have to go and create a dForce modify weight node on it and parent it to it. And then with my weight node selected on the tool settings, I'm going to go and create, well, with the, first of all, I need to go and create a dForce dynamic surface for it to work. Sorry, not the, gotta change the plane, dForce, oops, dynamic surface. There we go. Now I click the node. In the node, I click my plane, and then, you know, plane is planes here. So my plane has a lot of divisions. So we should be able to see this all right. So these are the tools here. This one is the paint tool, and we've already seen how to use it. You left click and drag over it, and then that makes your selection here. I'm going to crack, that's going to paint in or out. So hold control, sorry, left click to paint in, hold alt to paint out. That's one tool. Very harsh, going from full whack to nothing. The one next to it here, next to P, that is the smoothing brush. So if you select that, that's a different tool. That will now, if you left click and drag over a border, that will go and smooth this out. So it'll go and take this edge and make it a little blurrier. And if you do it often enough, this is now a transition. So this is technically a gradient, but it's a manual and painted in gradient. So it's not something that we've created by saying from here to there, make it a gradient. So that's another tool, namely this one here. But this would be technically a gradient, from here to there, fall off thing. And that's also, that comes in handy as well. So this is, you know, that's a smoothing brush tool. Very cool. Then the gradient tool, I'm going to go and make sure this thing is not filled in at all. So I'm going to go and select all, fill this in with nothing. So we have nothing there. And for the gradient tool to work, I actually need a selection. So I'm going to select everything. And this is the gradient tool here. So you have to have a selection on which the gradient is applied. And it's super, super unintuitive, because now that I've selected it, it looks like this is actually where my tool is. So this is not where my weight map is. So it comes in at the center of the scene. That's kind of number one. That's a bit of a problem. You can move this, and on the dress, it's kind of going to be in the correct position. The way this works is that this is the start of your gradient, this is the middle, and this is the end of your gradient. Let me go and make my dress and whoops, and my figure invisible. So start of the gradient, end of the gradient, middle bit. Left click and drag on the middle bit, and it just moves where that gradient thing is. And it's a little bit like a bone there, so it has these small, tiny little manipulators. Maybe I'm going to go and bring my map just slightly, my plane, sorry, slightly further back to kind of here. And when you move this tiny manipulator here, the other guy will follow. So you can move it up, or you can move it sideways. So it's really, really clunky to do that. So I suppose in my case, I'm going to look from the front. And I'm going to move this guy onto the bottom here. And it'll make more sense when we see it on the dress in a second. So now this is perhaps where I want my gradient to be starting and ending from. And I can also left click and drag on this guy, and then it'll decide where the midpoint of the gradient is. So this is of course not the gradient just yet, but we have a couple of options that have opened up here. So apply gradient would create the actual gradient. If I do that, then we have it. This is the gradient. So it's now gone from here to there. I can also flip that gradient, but when I do that, it doesn't create the gradient. It goes and flips these icons, and I have to go and apply the gradient again. And now it's applied it. So there are more options here. So if I go and put this in the middle, oops, apply gradient, then you can see that where that fall off begins and where it starts. So that's why this middle bit is in there. Align to bone is something in which you don't have to move the top and bottom into position. You can use an existing bone to align that against. Yeah, but that is how this works. And now we have a gradient. But for this to work, you had to have a selection in place. So if I go and say clear selection, and in fact, sorry, actually bring that back, select all and fill this in with nothing. I believe without a selection, this doesn't work. So if we go and say apply gradient, oh, it does work. It does work. Okay, so you don't have to have a selection. Okay, I thought you had to. Okay, good. That's good to know. I'm glad we tried that out. So if you wanted to have that gradient start a little bit like in the middle here, then you could do that, apply, and then it starts from here. But it'll leave all this untouched because, of course, we haven't used it. So the beauty of it is it doesn't just work. It doesn't work just in 2D space like on a plane. It also works in 3D space. So let me show you how this can come in handy on our dress. So let me go bring that back. And I would have thought we had one gradient tool per object, but I guess that is not quite the case. What a shame. So I want to use it so that the bottom of the dress is more dForced than the top. So I suppose had I not messed with it, this would have been much easier to bring back into its position. But if I go and look from the front, this goes kind of here and this goes kind of there. Not even to the very top. I'm just concerned about the skirt. So I'll use something like from here to there. Right, and it works in 3 dimensions, so that's kind of cool. Let me go and I'm just going to make sure I'm going to be underneath this here, underneath the skirt, and then the middle bit is kind of here. It's really, really tricky to see, I know. But with that in place, let me go and apply the gradient. And this has almost done what we wanted it to do. So it's applied less at the top and more at the bottom. But it's done it everywhere around the skirt. So that is very valuable tool to have. So it's a bit of a crazy thing that it's so difficult to adjust this. Like, you know, maybe I want less fall off here, so I've just moved that middle disc a little bit down. See, apply gradient, now it goes down a little bit further. Apply, there we go. So this is nice because it means I didn't have to paint out my dress quite that much. See what happens now when we go and simulate this. Crazy, isn't it? And the same is possible with the spherical gradient as well, but truth be told, I've not worked out how to use it. So this is the spherical gradient, and that would have a sphere in the middle and a sphere on the outside. You can move them independently, but I haven't quite worked out how to use that efficiently. So I'll show you how it works in principle, but I have no idea really how to use it. So once again, very different look and feel for our dress. I think the only other thing I'd like to change is that I like to make a similar selection at the bottom that I've had at the top, which we can then fill in with something a little stiffer so that the bottom doesn't fall down like that. I'd like for it to be held in place, like there's a bit of stability at the hem. Let's try that. Simulate without a save. I can't save all the time, you know. Let's do that. And this is, again, another good example of the selections here. The bottom bit, that might work if we go, once again, with the geometries editor. If I go and try to select just this bottom edge here. We selected it? Yes, it's selected, isn't it? Can we select things? Yeah, good stuff. So this here, bottom edge, or bottom two edges, I'm happy with either really. Let's see if we can loop it. Did it work? Did it, buffalo? Let's see if we select this here. Selection loop. Did it work? It doesn't, does it? So we'll need to use our trick again with the edge selection, because I have a feeling edge selection is probably going to work no problem. Like this here. Selection. Oh, first of all, clear selection. Select one edge. Try to loop it. Yes, that works. Look at that. Edge has been looped. Now we'll go and hit Control plus on the numpad to do this. And maybe one more. So that'll be the bottom two faces. Now we go geometry selection, convert selection to polygon selection. We have the bottom two rows. That's perfect. Selection set. Let's go and save that as skirt bottom, just in case you have to go back and redo your weight maps and whatnot. You know exactly what to select and how to select it, how to unselect it. That's kind of cool. So if you wanted to select this again, say if I had my clear selection, if I wanted to reselect that, you just go right click, geometry selection, select by, and then you go selection sets, and then we have skirt bottom and skirt top. So that is why this is valuable, to bring it back. So we have that, and now I want to go and go back to my weight brush tool and fill this with a slightly lesser value. I'm going to go and say weight editing, fill selected, maybe not with 0, but maybe with something like 30. Perfect, so that's that. But also I don't want the transition to be quite that harsh. So this can be done by weight editing, smooth selected. And I'll just use 50% and number of iterations 20. So this is as if I'm using my smooth brush and go over this with 50% 20 times. And that was too much, wasn't it? Okay, Control Z. Let's try that again. Smooth selected. Maybe I'm going to go over it, 5 times instead. Yeah, that's also not enough. Weight editing, smooth selected. Maybe I'll go over it twice. Twice is good. So it's smoothed out a little bit here. Geometry selection, clear selection. There we go. So there's this bit at the bottom here that is still red, which is a shame. I'd rather it wasn't. So let's see if we can make that happen with my edge selection, clear selection. I'll just select this edge. No, I'm not selecting anything anymore because it's not working anymore. Dang. Okay, fine. We'll leave that as it is then, and go. Oh, because I wasn't on paint selection. I wasn't in the geometry editor. Duh. Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. Everything's good. Everything's good. Let's go do this here. Let's select that in edge selection and loop. Yes, very good. Control plus That's it. Convert selection to polygon selection. That hasn't quite worked. Dang. Control plus one more time. Selection, convert selection to polygon selection. Yes! That's it. Fantastic. Back to my weight node brush thing. I'm going to go and fill this just with like, you know, the 20%, no, 30%. 30% is good. 30. There. So now the bottom isn't red anymore. Whew. And now, before I simulate, I certainly will save it. Dang! And now, let's see how it simulates, shall we? So this should keep the bottom bit in a slightly stiffer position. So the kind of the towards the bottom of the dresses should fall in, but the rim at the bottom should stay a little bit stiffer. Like so, indeed, yes. Come on. Maybe that's a little bit too stiff. So this is where that selection set comes in handy. Maybe we needed to increase that a little bit. So maybe 30% wasn't actually influence enough. And it needs to, well, it kind of comes out, doesn't it? It kind of comes out. But maybe 30% was just not enough. So maybe 50% would have been better. See if we can go back and just adjust that quickly. Since we almost still have that. So select action type, we'll select by selection type, first of all, that, and then select by selection sets, skirt bottom. I'll go and increase that a little bit, and then I'll go and fill this in, fill selected maybe with, like, say 50. See what that looks like. Or 60, let's do 60, let's do 60. Fill selected, let's do 60. Dang, okay, fine. And simulate, let's see what happens. And that is 1500%, let's do it, let's do it. Can you change the yellow color? It's possible. There are a lot of things that you can change in the UI. I don't know if the selection color, I'll show you where I think it should be. And then we can see if it actually does what we think it does. Sometimes it's helpful to, when you're working on these objects, that you're not working with the texture, but just with the flat color on it. So here the smooth shaded is just very light gray. I don't know if you can change that, but you could go into filament or into texture shaded and then pick yourself color values. So that makes it more usable. But if we can change the yellow of the selection, that would be under Window, Workspace, and then Customize. And this is where I would look for that. Where exactly to find a geometry editing selection, perhaps? Geometry visibility. Nah. This is where I'd look. But if it's not in there, it's not in there. Sorry. That is, we've talked a lot about so many things. Did we have any questions? Let me just have a quick look on the questions section. If you haven't asked the questions yet, now is your time. I do have another 20 minutes. If there's anything you would like me to show or don't know about, then let me know. WebSoul is asking, what is the difference between Horse 3 and the Thoroughbred? That's a good question. As far as I understand it, the Daz Horse 3 is a bit like Genesis 9 base, and the Thoroughbred is a custom character for Horse 3. So a bit like Victoria, what Victoria is to Genesis 9, the Thoroughbred is to the Horse 3, if that makes sense. So like the reindeer that was released before Christmas is based on Horse 3, but technically it's a custom character for Horse 3. I hope that makes sense. And is the geometry for horse 3 the same as for thoroughbred horse? Yes, that is pretty much the as I said. And the selector color, yeah, that is not something I know much about. Sorry about that. You have to jump off. Victoria, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you learned something. It's wonderful to be able to help you out. That's really cool. I'm just going to go and bring these guys back here. I've just made them invisible. Hello, oh, now that they're invisible, I can't select them anymore. Dang, what a shame. No, it's because I'm not selecting the correct figure here. This here. Nope, that's another trick that I wanted to show you. If you ever have this problem like I have now, that I'm thinking I really want to make an adjustment, I want to make a selection on the dress, but every time I do that, it seems that I'm accidentally selecting my character. You can always go and use this little tick box icon here and click that. That means everything of my character now becomes unselected and only the dress is selectable. So if you have something that keeps intersecting with one another, just make one part unselectable. And if you just hit that tick box, it just makes that node unselectable. But if you hold down Control and the tick box, then everything underneath it is also unselectable. So if you had something like a clothing item that's parented to the character, select the character, Control, make that unselectable. That also makes the dress or the clothing unselectable. But then you Control click on the clothing and then makes that selectable. So good stuff, that. I think, you know, if Victoria's going, I'm going. I'm thinking, yeah, this was nice. I'm glad I could bring some knowledge across, and I will look into why those hierarchical horse poses don't work, because that is a total mystery to me. I'm going to have a look at that, and if I figure it out, I'm totally going to make a video about it. Have a wonderful rest of Saturday. Thank you so much for being here. It's always nice to join you on the Daz Plus side of things. I'm going to be back in about 4 weeks' time, also here on the hidden depths of the Daz Plus functionality, and I hope I can say hello to you once again there as well. So have a wonderful rest of Saturday, and I'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.